Good evening, Baruchim Abayim Rabotai. Welcome to another edition of our Thursday night's class. Tonight there's no sponsors. Look at that, that was easy. In this week's parasha, we are going to read, or learn, I should say, one pasuk that I want to discuss in an indirect way. After crunch time comes for Yehuda, and he realizes that he has everything at stake. Yehuda took Binyamin down to Egypt, putting at stake his Olam Hazeh and his Olam Haba. Chazal say that Moshe Rabbeinu had to pray for Yehuda many, many years later to get him into Gan Eden, just because he said out of his mouth that if he wouldn't bring back Binyamin, then he's willing to forego his Olam Haba. And he realized that it's not working out, and he can't follow through. So there are many, many pshatim on what he proactively did. But in Chazal itself, there's different options. But it seems like he wanted to relay the message to the king that he didn't know yet was Yosef, that he means business and he's getting his brother at any cost. So in Chazal, there are a few opinions. Either he threatened them to destroy the whole Egypt, not directly, indirectly. Right? They were under the assumption that they spoke, can't call it Hebrew, but the language of the Jews. And they didn't know that Yosef understood it as well. He told his brother to run and figure out how many streets are in Egypt, how many main streets, meaning we'll call it highways. When he came back and told them that there's 12, so he told them, each one of you take one and I'll take the rest and we'll destroy the whole Egypt. And Yosef is hearing this and knew that Yehuda was capable of doing so. And other opinions as well. There's a very famous Or HaChaim HaKadosh that's used a lot, definitely in parenting classes, that the Or HaChaim HaKadosh writes, Vaigash means he went closer. So, of course, in the context of the pasuk, it means that he went to speak to him privately, or in a more respectful manner. He didn't want to threaten him publicly, at least. The Or HaChaim HaKadosh says an interesting thing, I'm sure I quoted it in the past, that Yehuda understood the idea of Kamayim Panim El Panim Kein Leva Adam El Adam, that the way you feel about somebody else is the way they're going to feel about you. And at that point, he had hated him. And the Or HaChaim writes, because Kigdal Kam Shel Tzadikim, the way of the righteous is not to despise Resha, evil. And this was an evil dictator, so of course he couldn't like him. But when he realized he needs him to cooperate, he said, I have to go and break my way of despising people that aren't righteous, and actually learn to like him. Because if I like him, he'll like me back in return, and as a result, he's going to go in the right way. That whole book that I promoted many times in the past few years called Just Love Them about David Shrink was exactly based on this Or HaChaim. This was the talking point of his whole life. If a kid gave him a hard time in yeshiva, that wasn't a reason to punish him. That was a reason now to show him more love and more affection. Because if he's not behaving, it's not his fault. David used to say, it's my fault. Because if I would have shown him enough love, he would have never had to misbehave. If he's misbehaving, that means I didn't show him enough love, so we're missing the whole thing, right? But anyway, one way or the other, at one point Yosef realized that it's crunch time. Now either he resolves this with his brothers or it's over. So the pasuk says that he comes to them and he tells them, Yosef litapek, he couldn't hold back anymore, and he threw everybody out of the room except for his brothers. Vaiten kolo bebechi, it's an emotional moment, he started crying. It seems to be a very loud cry, because the pasuk says that Beit Paro and the whole Mitzrayim were able to hear him cry. This is not a regular tear, it's an outburst, we call it. Vayomer Yosef elechav, this is the pasuk I want to discuss. Yosef told his brothers, Ani Yosef, Am Yosef, Ha'od Avi Chai, is my father still alive? And the pasuk continues, V'lo yachlu echav la'anot oto, his brothers couldn't respond, they froze, they shut down. Ki nivalu mipanav, because they were scared of him. This pasuk needs a lot of explanation. It's just the opposite. They shouldn't be scared of him. Up until now, they should have been scared of him because he was a dictator. But now that they know he's their brother, what are they scared of? So of course, you could simply say maybe they were scared that he would take revenge or something like that. But that's not the case, because we see that in next week's parasha that they resolve the issue of their fear of revenge. So Rashi writes, Ki nivalu mipanav, Ba'ala normally is fear, panic. Rashi says, no, that's not the case. Nivalu mipanav mipnei habusha. Because of shame. They were embarrassed. They realized, in retrospect, everything we ever did was wrong. When they sold him l'shem shamayim. They thought they were doing a mitzvah. He was a roidif. And a roidif al pi halachos chayiv misa, and they're doing the right thing. Not only that, Hashem was part of their bezdin. That means God gave them a stamp of approval. So it wasn't just that they knew they were right. They were beyond reasonable doubt that they were right. Hashem himself agreed with them. So everything was flawless, lichora. It was as perfect as could be. And now they see, wait a second, we thought we're getting rid of him, instead we turned him into a king. So obviously everything was wrong. So they were embarrassed of their own judgment calls, their own mistakes. And shame causes a lot of harm in life. Because it's very hard to say, I was wrong, and now let's do it better. It's a lot easier to just con the way out. And that's what most people do their whole life, by the way. Including in science and in academia, not only including, primarily. For somebody to pull back on what he believed or what he was teaching for many years, that's probably the greatest test that exists in mankind. There's a very famous chazal in this pasuk that roughly, I'm not quoting word for word, Abba Kohen Bardila, that was the name of the rabbi, said, Oy lanu miyom adin, oy lanu miyom hatochacha, u'ma Yosef k'tanam shel shvatim. Yosef, that was second, the youngest of the tribes. His brothers were so embarrassed they couldn't stand in front of him. K'sheyavo HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'yochiach et kol adam v'adam b'asher hu. When Hashem comes and we have to face God, each person as an individual, based on his abilities or potential, so what's a person going to respond? Now, of course, if you want to take it into a negative context, we could now start sending people to hell and say, oh my God, what's going to be, and whatever. But that's definitely not the case. That's not what the pasuk says, because the pasuk says, mipnei habusha, from shame. It doesn't say from anything else. Meaning, that's the only thing that's here. What I want to discuss about this pasuk is not to explain the pasuk that I've done in previous years. There's many classes, you could listen to them all. I had a lot of explanations in this. I want to discuss what applies to us today as individuals. We are all on one level or the other, either traditional or observant or something affiliated with something or the other. But I'm sure we all consider ourselves dignified people, intellectually honest people, and people that want to do the right thing. And we work very hard at it, and we make very great sacrifices against it. And we used to be the mainstream, that was the norm in society. Today we're the minority, because today, if you're progressive, you're cool. So we're the not cool ones, thank God. And we're proud to be primitive, because we still have old school values. But what if we were to be faced one day with all the efforts and sacrifices that we made, and everything that we've done, and realize it was all in vain? Imagine working 40 years on building the tallest skyscraper in the world in the most sophisticated way, investing hundreds of billions of dollars into it, and time and thought and everything possible, and you come to get a CEO on the building, and they realize there's some foundational structural issue, and the building has to be taken down. What would a developer feel like at that point? Forget about the loss of money and that factor, just emotionally. The disappointment, what? My whole life? Or so many years and nothing? So obviously the most critical thing in life to do is to be sure that we don't find ourselves in such a situation. There are people that are bad in this world. And bad people I try to stay away from, but at least they think in their sick mind that they are deriving some benefit from being bad. People that I pity are those that think they're good and they're the ultimate evil. Because they don't even derive pleasure from what they're doing. So it's an avera without any reward. Somebody who does a sin, but at least he has a desire to do it and derives pleasure from it. It's sad that he's up to that in life, but okay. At least he's getting some sort of materialistic pleasure. At least there's the Yetzer Hara involved. But somebody who's sinning when there's no Yetzer Hara involved, or he's working so hard on doing the right thing, but really the rug is going to be pulled out from under his feet, that's the person who technically we would pity most. So I want to learn with you a piece in the Kaveh Yashar. Might not be so pleasant to hear, I apologize in advance, but it's better to know the truth today than to one day have to face that we lived a lie our whole life. So that's my disclaimer on this. The Kaveh Yashar says a story. And the story goes roughly like this. There was a story with a Chassid Echad. One Chassid's a righteous person. A Chassid, Chazal says, a person who does Lifni Mishuat Adin, meaning he doesn't only observe what he has to. He walks the extra mile, gives everything the benefit of the doubt. The ultimate righteous person. Shalach baderech, he was walking on the way. We have this righteous man, he was walking on the way. Amazing. V'nizdamen imo Eliyahu Hanavi. And he met Eliyahu Hanavi. Not bad, double righteous, right? He also met Eliyahu Hanavi along the way. Pretty cool. And they saw a nevela, it's a dead animal, on the side of the road. And the Kaveh Yashar brings down, Vaita nevela masricha sirachon gadol. And this dead animal had a very unpleasant odor, we'll call it. So the Chassid closed his nose, he didn't want to breathe it. It bothered him. When the Democrats decided to impose mask mandates, they didn't realize really what the message they were sending is. They were telling people our actions are going to stink so badly, you better cover your nose, you won't be able to breathe us. That's really what they did behind it. That's why in Republican states they don't have these mask mandates, because they don't stink as bad. There were crazy actions. This dead animal's on the side of the road, and there's a sirachon gadol. And this man closes his nose. Eliyahu Hanavi walked close to the dead animal, and he made it a point to show that the bad odor, we'll call it, didn't bother him at all. Now this wasn't an angel thing, that because he's an angel it doesn't bother him. He had been on earth in the form of a person, meaning he was behaving in human characteristics. When the Kaveh Yashar continues the story, they continued, they were walking, they were going on a walk. They were, while they were walking, they had already passed this animal, and they saw a person coming towards them. And the words of the Kaveh Yashar are, Vehaya, Vehalichaito aita, and his demeanor and his walking was, Begava, arrogance, Begasut ruach. I'm the best, He's better than, he's a cut above. V'haya mitpa'er u'mityaher be'atzmo. And he was showing off about himself. You ever sat with somebody by a table and he tells you about how much money he has or what big businesses he has? Or whoever been put into such a situation? That's the person that the Kaveh Yashar is talking about. I'm so smart, I have so many employees, I'm so this, I'm so that. Yeah, so listen to this. So this guy starts walking towards them. When Eliyahu Hanavi saw him from far, he didn't even reach them yet. He put his hand on his nose. He couldn't, meaning the dead animal on the side of the road, that didn't bother him. He didn't have to cover, that he was able to tolerate. But the arrogant person, at that point he had to close his nose. So the Chassid asked him, the Kaveh Yashar says, when we walked by this dead animal that smelled terribly, you didn't cover your nose. Well, now we're walking by a random person and you put your hand on your nose, you're covering your nose. What happened? It should be just the opposite. And the Kaveh Yashar writes that Eliyahu Hanavi answered him, listen to these words, Adam ze masriach yoter min nevela. This person stinks more than a dead animal. Why? Because he was arrogant, because he was showing off, because he was flaunting his self-value. He stinks more than a dead animal. Why? Listen to this. When a nevela, if you touch it, al pi halacha, you become impure in the days that we kept Tumah and Tahara the right way. Ad ha'erev, right? But by the evening, you're back pure again. But a person, when he dies, Tumat Amet is much more stringent, much longer period of Tumah. And he said, this person, because he's a Baal Gava, he stinks like a dead man, and I got to stay away from him. I don't want to get Tumat Amet. Frightening. So now imagine a person, his whole life, he went to Ivy League schools, he's a graduate of some fancy name, graduated top 1% in the school, he's a CEO of a big company, runs an empire, and he also is a frum Jew. Learns the daf, goes to shul, all these beautiful things. And he thinks he's the biggest success story in the world. But he's not humble. He's going to come up to heaven thinking that he's going straight to paradise, And I don't know if he will or won't go to paradise. I'm not God. But what I do know is the angels along the way, when he's going up to heaven, are not even going to want to get close to him because that's how much he stinks. Because he's a Baal Gava. That's the red line by God. That we can't deal with. Meaning, when the Torah evaluates a person and his self-value, the Torah's primary concern is his character traits. That's where it starts, that's where it ends. Everything else is already a step below, is a cut under, we'll call it. So listen to what Rav Shalom Shadon says. Why did Eliyahu Hanavi say he smells worse than an animal? An animal is a bad enough example, a dead animal of a smell. You say he smells like the nevela. To you the nevela stinks, to me this stinks. Why is it worse? Rav Shalom Shadon says on this Kaveh Yashav, a frightening chidush, or analogy. He says, you know why? Because when you walk into a room and something stinks, you know to stay away. You have a way out. You walk away from it. So it bothered you for 1 minute, but after that it doesn't bother anymore. Everything's fine. But when somebody is a big shot, externally he looks like a success story. He drives a fancy car, he has a good education, he's running a big business, he's a big donor, his name's on a few buildings. Everything about it looks great. And if he knows Torah, even more dangerous. Talmid Chacham, says good classes, great guy, we should want to have some. So not only don't you know to stay away from it, people are unfortunately impressed by it. And they want to stay close. That's what Eliyahu Hanavi told this Chassid. That's so much more dangerous. Because the impact and the damage that it can do to society and the character traits that can rub off on others that are negative are so much more risky. You know, there's an old saying, an empty can makes a lot of noise. The more full a can is, the less noise it makes, even if it drops. If you want to know how empty or full a person is, see how much he's showing off. And how much he's trying to impress people. And anybody who has anything real in life, any person who has an ounce of substance, you'll never find any of those characters by. Even an ounce. Forget about an extensive amount. But it goes further. It goes further. When Hashem created man, so the Pasuk says, in the first parasha in the Torah, Pasuk says, one of the things that later on people were able to make mistakes in faith over, Vayom Elokim, Hashem said, Naaseh Adam, Naaseh in plural, we shall make. God is one, not we. And that's how Otzeli Toti Yavo V'Yiteh. It was deliberately done that way to leave place for error for others. Besides that, Rashi brings down in Chazal that Hashem wanted to show humility, as if he quote unquote consulted with the angels before he made the decision of making man. B'tzalmeinu kidmuteinu, in our image. Then later on it says, when Hashem actually did it, this was in the initial planning stage. Vayivra Elokim et Adam, Hashem created man, b'tzalmo, in his image, b'tzelem Elokim bara oto. Right? One was in Bereshit Perek Aleph Pasuk Chav Vav, the other one was Bereshit Perek Chaf Aleph Pasuk Chaf Zayin. So, in a matter of Pasuk after Pasuk, it went from B'tzalmeinu Kidmuteinu and to B'tzalmo. One was plural, the next one was singular. Meaning the planning phase sounded plural, and then the execution phase of creating man was singular. God created us in his image, every person. B'tzelem Elokim bara et Adam. So why the differentiation in the words? So the Mfarshim say a very beautiful pshat on this that fits the theme that we're saying. Hashem tells a person, I'm giving you the image. Meaning I'm giving you the tools to work with. But the demut, the image that you want to portray, the way you want to portray yourself to others, that you got to do yourself. You got to create your own actual character traits. Your personality you have to make. That doesn't come from me. I'll give you all the tools up to the point that you're created in my image. Meaning you have eternal power. But from that point on, it's in your hands already. All right, it fits very well with the famous thing that I said over from Rav Shach countless times. Rav Shach said it over countless times. Obviously, this is one of his favorite things to say. Why do we make a blessing Shelo Asani Goy? We should make a blessing Sha'asani Yehudi. I said Shelo Asani Goy. Hashem made us a Yehudi. So Rav Shach says, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes you that you're not a Goy, but only you can make yourself a Jew. It's a short shot, but that's the foundation of life. Hashem kaveh Shelo Asani Goy, but you want to be a Yid, you're the only one who can make. There's nobody else can make that. By the way, the same thing is with Shelo Asani Aved. Why was it Shelo Asani Aved didn't become a slave? Say Shasani ben Cholim. So Antifa answers that very well. There's no slavery in the United States for many years, but they're still looting stores and burning down places and killing people right and left and whatever. Because not being a slave is not having slavery. You could not have slavery, but if you don't learn to be free, it's all worthless. So we say a blessing, Shelo Asani Aved. Hashem didn't put us enslaved. But to be a free person, we're the only ones that can create our own self-freedom. Otherwise, we'll still stay in slave mentality. And that's why, by the way, the greatest miracle when the Jews came out of Egypt was that after being slaves for 210 years, they were able to instantly convert into a free mentality. But there's no way to understand that, definitely not in the medical literature of the way the mind is wired. The Zohar Kadosh writes that after a person passes away, Hashem's going to ask him, what did he do in this world? And the Zohar says that he's going to answer that he prayed, did some mitzvot, and Hashem is going to say, all that, not impressed. Why? B'schuti asita. He did it because of me. I created you in a tzelem Elokim, so your instincts was to do the right thing, to do mitzvot and whatever. But what was your part in it? What did you do that I didn't give you? What did you create? So the Zohar says that when a person works on his character traits to be a better person, a more kind person, a more loving person, a more patient person, a less judgmental person, then at that point, he takes the tzelem Elokim that Hashem makes and turns it into a tzelem Yehudi. Instead of leaving a status quo, he converts the status quo into something that should be a positive thing. Now imagine a person sat his whole life and did all the right things. He followed Shulchan Aruch to the T, every single halacha. And he's convinced on his deathbed he's going up to Gan Eden Elyon, he's going to be in the best place ever. He bought Kol Nidrei and Maftir Yonah and gave charity and did this and then learned and sent his sons to yeshiva and paid son-in-laws to learn in Kollel and whatnot, all the beautiful things that exist. And I'm not, they're all beautiful, by the way. But he would get angry. He would be arrogant. He would demand respect. He would, and the list goes on. And the rug is pulled out. Hashem says, okay, you gave charity, I gave you the money, big deal. Kept a few mitzvot, I created you in my image, I would sure hope you did. The only thing that could have made you, that you didn't do. Gone. That's going to be like, the shame. Really? I messed it all up like that? And that's why Chazal teach us, Derech Eretz Kadma la Torah. Before Torah, before anything, the first thing is Derech Eretz, is to be a mensch. Is to become a person. And Chazal say, by the way, that the person who has the merit, then the Torah becomes for him Sam Chaim, lifeline. But if not, the same Torah could be Sam Mavet, could be a death sentence. Meaning the Torah itself allowed room to utilize it for the wrong reasons. That's how far we created free will. You can even take the Torah and twist it for the wrong reason. Up to there. And this is important to speak about and to elaborate a lot on because, everything depends on it, right? Nobody wants to find themselves in a situation that everything they put their efforts into really went down the tubes. So let's analyze from scratch. There's a Gemara in Shabbat, Afeitet. I'm willing to bet that everybody in this room knows this Gemara, maybe not word for word, but roughly by heart. The Gemara says that when Moshe Rabbeinu went from HaKadosh Baruch Hu after Matan Torah, the Satan came and said, Ribono shel Olam, Torah ichani, where's the Torah? Moshe Rabbeinu went up to heaven, brought down the Torah. Now the Satan wakes up, he started trouble. Where's the Torah? So Hashem answered him, Netati al haaretz, I gave it to the earth. Meaning I gave it to mankind. So the Satan went down to earth, is what the Gemara says. And the Gemara elaborates. The earth, the oceans, this, all over. Death, whatever that means. I don't know how you go to death, but he went to all different places, whatever that means. And he kept on asking each entity, we'll call it, if the Torah is by it. Is the Torah there? And the Torah wasn't there. So he comes back to God and he says, Ribono shel olam, Master of the world, chipastia b'chol haaretz v'lo motzati. I looked for it all over the world, but I couldn't find it. So Hashem told him, Lech etzel ben Amram. Go to the son of Amram, meaning Moshe Rabbeinu. It's by him. So the Satan came to Moshe and said, is the Torah by you? So the Gemara says, he answered him, V'chima ani shenatani HaKadosh Baruch Hu Torah. Who am I that Hashem should give me the Torah? Moshe Rabbeinu was the ultimate humble man. So he's like, I don't know, what are you doing for me? Who am I? Why should Hashem give me the Torah? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Moshe, badayata? Moshe, are you a liar? I gave you the Torah. Why'd you answer him that? So the Gemara says he answered, Ribono shel olam, חמודה גנוזה יש לך שאתה משתעשע בה בכל יום. אני אחזיק טובה לעצמי. You have such a precious gift, the Torah, that this is what everything, it's put into human terms, that you enjoy, derive pleasure from every day. And I should take credit for myself that you gave it to me. It's yours, it's not mine. Comes the Gemara and says, listen to this. Hashem told him back, Ho'ilu mi'atta et atzmecha, because you belittled yourself. HaTorah tikarei al shmecha. The Torah is going to be named after you. And that's why it says in the Pasuk, Zichru Torat Moshe Avdi. Remember Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah. Lanetzach, for eternity. The Torah Kdosha, when Hashem tells you to remember the Torah, He says, remember Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah, the Torah was the whole world. It was the blueprint of the world. Many, many years and generations that we can't even understand the numbers of, because they're eternal figures. Before the world was created in the form we know, the Torah existed. How did it become Moshe's Torah? It's not Moshe's Torah. Ho'il umi'atta tatzmecha. Because you were willing to lower yourself. But what's the big deal? Why? Chaim Zaitchik Zitzal. I don't know how many of them he wrote, but many of his Sfarim were written in his name from his students. Yeah, it's a large set of Sfarim called Or Chadash. There are others as well. It's a legend in giving over things that had to do with the explanation of Torah and holidays and the Parshiot and legendary. So he says, how could it be that nobody knew where the Torah was? What does it mean nobody knew where the Torah was? Let's make the question a little stronger. Chazal say, when Hashem gave the Torah, He silenced the entire world. Not only the world the way we know it, the entire hemisphere. The examples of the Gemara are that a bird didn't chirp and a bull didn't make noise, and there's all different examples like that, right? And everything stood still in honor of the giving of the Torah. So what does it mean, Torah Ichani? Why did God even give the Satan the time of day? Where's the Torah? What do you mean, where's the Torah? You were also silenced to watch me giving the Torah. You know very well where the Torah is. Why? Chaim Zaitchik says an unbelievable thing. The Satan knew that somebody who received the Torah and has anything to do with the Torah his essence has to change. He has to become a different person. It's not the same human as the day before. Because the Torah, if it's utilized in the pure way, not in a corrupt way, makes a person more gentle, makes a person more kind, makes a person more loving, makes a person more forgiving, creates a better person. Comes with Chaim Zaitchik and says a mind-boggling chidush. He says the Satan wasn't playing games with God. He said, Rebbeinu Shalom, I don't understand. I see the malachim, I don't see any changes in them. Same thing. I see the ocean, I don't see any changes in that too. I see the trees, I don't see any changes in them either. So Torah Ichani, where's the essence of the Torah? What was recreated because of the Torah? Where did the Torah have impact? I don't see it. And if so, what was the point of giving it? Because if they're not accepting it in the right way, it's better not to give it to them. We know in halacha, for example, mutav shiyu shogigim v'ayu mizidim. Somebody doesn't know halacha, but we're definite that he won't keep it even if he knows it. It's better not to teach it to him. At least over here, he's only a shogeg. Otherwise, he's a mezid. The halacha, Samazam and Arbach and Alichot Shlomo, writes a halacha that's going to be very hard for most parents to accept. But if a person has a son and he knows that his son doesn't like waking up in the morning, and he wants to wake him up for the prayers, but the kid is just going to turn over and go right back to sleep, he shouldn't wake him up. Because at least if he's sleeping, he's an oinus, so he didn't miss Kriyat Shema deliberately. But once you woke him up, he becomes a poshea, so don't wake him up. Don't turn him into a poshea. Art k'dei kach. It's a big chidush. Most parents can't hear this one. They get upset when they hear it. No, Shlomo never said it. I'll tell you an interesting thing. In Kol Torah, in the yeshiva that I learned, Rav Shamzan was the yeshiva. I think we were probably the only, at least brand name big yeshiva in Israel, that there was no such thing as somebody waking the boys up in the morning. Every yeshiva always had, in Yiddish it was called a vekker. Somebody woke people up. Historically, it's like that, right? The story is already from Chaim Volozhin's times about who woke up the boys and whatever. And there was none because of this psak halacha. So what if a boy is, between 1,000 boys, there's going to be at least 2 that are not going to want to wake up. But now that you woke them up, they went from being an oinus to a posheh. There's no heter for that. And that was the Satan's question. Torah ichani. What changed? Where's the change? So Hashem said, I gave it to the earth. Go look. He went, and he really looked. He was sincere. He says, the ocean still, the waves are going the same way. The shore is still the same. It's stopping at the same shore. The beach sand's still the same. Everything's the same. So Hashem told him, Leichetz Ben Amram, go to Ben Amram. Go to a mankind, flesh and blood. Go over there. Over there you see where the Torah is. And what did he see? He saw that Moshe Rabbeinu, who received the Torah from Hashem, after being the only human to face God face to face, 40 days, lechem lo achalti, umayim lo shatiti, didn't eat, didn't drink, everything that doesn't fit any human character, says, who am I that the Torah should be given to me? Instead of getting up there and saying, I'm the greatest, maybe taking out a stadium to make a big siyum or something, you got the Torah from God, who am I? I'm nobody. And there the Satan saw where the Torah is. He saw how the Torah can change a person. That everything that he should be taking credit for. I'm not a show-off, I don't have to flaunt anything, I do things for myself because they're right, that's where it starts, that's where it ends. And nobody else has to know about it. And there he saw the ultimate tikkun amidot, the ultimate correction of the human character traits. Naturally, I don't disagree with Freud's theories. Well, most of them I do. But with the one that says that a human has animalistic characters. Yeah, we were created the same. There's no difference. It doesn't take much. Just walk the streets of Manhattan. You'll see. It's very factual what he said. You don't need to be a scientist anymore. I remember 35 years ago, I was a young boy, and I was in Israel. We used to go to Israel for all the holidays. So one of the holidays, we were in Israel, and we were in this Arachim seminar, and we were bored, Chol HaMoed, what do kids do when they're bored? They make everybody crazy. That's part of being a kid, by the way. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. If a kid doesn't do that, it's a problem. And so I was making my parents crazy. I'm bored, what do I do? Chol HaMoed, I want to go on a trip, this, that. I'm sure a little bit. I was good at it. Gotta give them credit. So, my father was speaking, my mother had her hands full. I wasn't, she had a bunch after me. And go to your uncle. Uncle's of Nissim. Go to him. He's taking the kids. He has his own kids there. They were also making him crazy. He didn't have to speak that afternoon. My father did. Go to him. He'll take you on a trip. See what he's doing. Join him. So I went. Uncle Nissim, what are we doing? So he said, I'm taking the boys, we're leaving in a few minutes, boys and girls, whatever. We're leaving in a few minutes. We're going to the safari. Then there was a safari in Ramat Gan. I don't know if it still exists, but back then in Ramat Gan there was a safari. We're going to the safari in Ramat Gan. Okay, safari sounds interesting. So we went on a bus. Yeah, back then speakers didn't get paid $8,000 to speak for 24 seconds, so they couldn't afford cars and drivers and this and that. They all worked for free. On a bus, bunch of kids, and poor Rav Nissi, that was the babysitter that afternoon. Chol HaMoed, I think it was Pesach. And they're on the bus. What do kids do when they get on a bus? After 1 minute, they want to get off already. When are we getting there? 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 The bus driver seemed to have gotten a little bit annoyed. We were sitting right behind him. So he turns back to my uncle, and I don't know if he knew who my uncle was or not, but he turned back to him, and he said, Adon, sir, what are these kids, where are you trying to go? I'll tell the kids where you're getting there. I don't want to, over and over again. So one of my cousins, one of my uncle's sons, told the driver, Lagan Chayot, to the safari. So he told him, you don't have to get there, you're there. Wherever you get off, this whole country is one big safari. And that he said 35 years ago. Imagine today, right? So what turns somebody from the safari to a person, right? Unfortunately, it's not how much you know. Years ago, I was naive. I thought the more you know, the better person you are. Knowledge is strength. And that's a true statement. I don't take that back. But that's knowledge. That's where it starts and ends. But you can have vast amounts of knowledge and be a vast mass murderer, aka Hitler. Hitler was a brilliant man. And many other examples that like that. The majority of today's progressives that proactively fight for the right to murder babies are people that are Ivy League school educated. They have vast amounts of knowledge in many areas. Some of them have 2, 3, 4 degrees in all different areas. And they're murderers. And they believe in murder as a value that they're going to fight for. And there's no way to water that down. That's the truth. That's just the way it is. They didn't want to put fancy words, the right to choose, the this, the that. Murderers. That means the connection between knowledge and who you are is zero. There is no connection. There is a connection of lack of knowledge to who you're not. That there is I want to stress. And that's why knowledge is extremely important to have. And a proper education and everything else. But just because you know a lot doesn't make you a person. You can still be an animal. You can actually be a bigger animal because you could be more sophisticated now. You could be a bigger shark. Somebody knows the banking system well. He could pull off a bigger bank fraud or a bigger Ponzi scheme. It doesn't have to be that he's going to be a more ethical person and make a more honest living. It could go the other way too. Unfortunately, Hashem allows, even within the Torah, the same thing. There's a difference between knowing the Torah and the Torah being part of you. Many people know the Torah. I have a few close acquaintances that are not Jewish, that know Gemara in a way that would blow your mind away. Every daf and every art scroll commentary and every this, and they're fascinated by Talmud. They spend hours a day learning Talmud. Extremely intelligent people. But that doesn't make them better people. Because they know the Torah. The Torah is not part of them. For the Torah to be part of you, you have to fit the criteria of what the Gemara says when the Torah was initially given. Torah heichanu. Where is the Torah? Where's the Torah dwelling? Where's it living? Not in which brain, in which heart, in which body, in which essence, in which soul. If it was all about knowledge, there wouldn't be a halacha bitula zui kiyuma, that many times not learning Torah is the actual keeping of the Torah. If everything's about knowledge, so the more you learn, the better. No, bitula is kiyuma. Somebody else needs you. We don't need your Torah right now. Go help somebody else. What are you doing? That's more important. And this goes on and on. No. It's an unbelievable. Listen to an unbelievable story of how Torah makes who a person is. I don't know the exact the names. I wish I did. It's a story that dates back. That's why I wish I did. I'm sure we're talking about great Torah giants. But in the era of the Chafetz Chaim, in that time period of Yeshivat Radin, there was a boy who, Aleinu, his father passed away. He was raised as an orphan from a very young age, and it was, it was before the days of life insurance and this and that. He didn't really have the means or the ability to stand a chance to do anything productive with his life. But the community took responsibility to do whatever they can to make sure that this kid doesn't feel that he's alone. And they provided him with the ability to go to yeshiva and money and care and love and a place to be and everything that they could possibly do for him. So we should never know, it didn't really work out so well. And I don't judge, we don't judge a kid who went through such a trauma, lost his parents at a young age. How do you expect him to be normal after that? And he was failing the system, it just wasn't working. And the people that were helping him out realized, again and again, we're going to do the same thing and try to keep him in school and it's not working. It's fine, let him go to work, let him go do something. At least he'll be a productive member of society. So they went to him and they told him, listen, school obviously is not for you. Not everybody's built for yeshiva, it's fine. So work. Do something to work. You can still be a ben Torah. Doesn't contradict. Rabbi Yochanan was a sandlar, was a shoemaker. Could be Rabbi Yochanan, you could still be a shoemaker. One has nothing to do with the other. The Rambam was one of the biggest doctors ever. Could be a doctor, you could still be the Rambam, the holy Rambam, who summarized the entire Torah in the Yad Chazakah. There's no contradiction. So they come to the boy, they explain him the situation, he understood it, and he said that he wants to go into the business that his father was in when he was still alive. What was his father's business? It was before the days of commercial cigarettes. So today those who smoke, it's fun to say that as an ex-smoker after so many years. Go to the store, buy a pack of cigarettes, and it all comes ready. The distance is a matter of just donating $16 to taxes, more or less, and you have cigarettes, and you can... Back in the day, it wasn't like that. That's why the Chafetz Chaim wrote a whole thing against smoking. It had nothing to do with health. Then they thought it was healthy to smoke. He wrote it because of Bitul Torah. He used to buy tobacco, and some people went back to that, just not with regular tobacco, with other types. And they put it in a paper and roll it, and yeah, you understand. Today they call it medicinal marijuana. But then they did that with regular tobacco too. So there was always the lazy crowd in the world, and just like we buy takeout and this and that. So there were cigarettes to go. There were people that provided a service that they rolled the cigarette for you, and you bought it from them ready-made, rolled up. So that was his father's business. His father made a living that way. So the kid, that's all he remembered from his father, wanted to hold on to his childhood memory. So he told the people that were helping him out, he wants to go into this cigarette business. So they said, fine. They connected him with a vendor who sells tobacco and sells the paper and whatever's needed. And every night he would sit at night a few hours and he would roll cigarettes and whatever. The next morning he would go to the shuls and the yeshivas and he would sell and people would buy from him. And he was selling a very, very high quality tobacco also, so people liked it, and he was making money. He was productive, he was doing something productive. At one point he was a little too successful and it got to his head and he started doing things that maybe weren't the best, let's just say. And they tried to speak to him and they tried to encourage him, and you were doing well, everything was, why do you have to mess it up? Nothing doing, it's not working. So, I want to give a disclaimer before I say the next sentence. This is not a good tactic today. This was good for then, not today. So don't learn from this. But the decision was that the man who supplies him the tobacco is going to cut him off. He's not going to supply him tobacco anymore. And then by default, he doesn't have a business. He's going to come running back for help, and then they're going to straighten him out. Tough love. Today, tough love doesn't work. Tough love murders. I know a girl I knew, she's not alive anymore. I'm only saying this because her mother told me I could say it publicly, who lived in Israel until a few days ago. She took her life in her own hands at the young age of 16, thanks to a stupid principal who yelled at her in public. That principal, al pi halacha, is a reitzeach, a murderer. There was a kid who already was bullied and had low self-esteem and many other issues. And then the principal pushed her over the edge, and she's no longer here. This week in Israel, 16. How careful a person has to be before they say one word. That's why today tough love doesn't work. Not only doesn't it work, it's a dangerous game. It costs lives every single day. Maybe we don't call them suicides. It's a different version of suicide. It's called drug overdoses. There's not one day that goes by that we don't have a kid dying just in the tri-state area of a drug overdose from our communities. And all of that would have been avoided if people wouldn't be bullying them, and people not as their classmates. Teachers, principals, stigmatizing, labeling. You're Sephardic, we're not going to take you to the school. Your parents are divorced, we're not going to take you to this school. You're this, is that. Your mother doesn't wear this, your father doesn't do that, your father wears a pink shirt. Yeah, these are the guys that are going to be held in the Shamayim, accountable for every one of these boys that overdosed, and every one of these girls that overdosed. They're the ones who murdered them. The kid, it wasn't his fault, he was a kid. He was in so much pain, he had no choice but to escape. So he resorted to all these things. That's the fact. I know it's not politically correct, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but I do it with love, because if I could save one more kid from killing themselves, or from overdosing, it's worth the price to pay along the way. Literally. But in the olden days, tough love still worked. They were stronger, their character was stronger. It was a different world. 100 years ago, it was a different world, you can't learn from this. So they cut him off from his tobacco supply, and exactly it played out. He went back to the guy, and he said, why'd you cut me off? He said, listen, I can't support bad habits, and you're doing bad things with the money you're making. You have to understand me too. The kid said, what do you mean? But I'm an orphan, and I'm this, and he tried to manipulate with guilt trips, and it didn't work, of course. And the man told him, I'm not doing this because I hate you, I'm doing this because I love you. And you want me to prove it to you? Commit to doing anything productive in the world, and stop doing stupid things. And you don't even have to work anymore. I will voluntarily support you financially for the rest of my life. I'll give you everything. All we want is the end game, that you should be a normal person, that's it. Or that you should at least make an effort. It worked. It hit the boy in the heart. They said, you know what, let me try yeshiva again. Round one, I was young and stupid, I wasn't ready. Now I already left yeshiva. Today it's a style. From birth, then went off the derech, then back on the derech, then starked out, then back off the derech, then this. There's a bunch of stages you got to go through. It normally makes dating interesting. The boys have a lot to talk about. When I starked out in Israel, when I came back to America, went to college, that's part of the way of life. One day is with tzitzis dangling, the next day is with a hair dangling, every time something else is, but there's always something dangling, that's what counts. The yo-yos. Depends what was on Instagram feed that morning, that's what I think it narrows down to. So he was also, he said, okay, we'll go back to yeshiva. He goes back to yeshiva. And this man's sticking to his word. He pays for his tuition, he pays for his private tutors, he gives him money unlimited, everything to encourage this kid to succeed. And it worked for a while, but then again he burnt out. Burnouts happen, that's human, that doesn't make you a bad person. Everybody's entitled to burn out. The question is what you do after the burnout. But everybody has a hard day. There's nothing wrong with that. That makes you very normal. So, the boy decided, listen, what am I going to do? I was given chance one to go to a yeshiva, I messed it up. Then I was given a chance at work, I made a mess out of that too. Then I was given chance two, the perfect handout from people who have nothing to gain but to see me do well. I'm about to mess it up too. He was too embarrassed to simply just admit that something's wrong. So he decided he's going to run away and nobody's going to ever find him again. He's going to figure out a way on his own for the first time to build his own life. Talking over 100 years ago, in times of Chofetz Chaim. It wasn't like today that kids on a phone in 3 seconds can figure life out, unfortunately, in dangerous ways. So he packed his stuff, but he was embarrassed to leave. He didn't want his roommates to see him leaving, because he had a certain shame inside. So he was torn. On one hand, he wants to leave yeshiva, run away. On the other hand, he's torn. He doesn't want to leave yeshiva. He doesn't know what to do. So he decides like this. The last boy in the yeshiva pretty much goes to sleep around 3 a.m. The first boy gets up around 5 a.m. Between 3 and 5, everybody's sleeping. That's when he's going to leave. Nobody's going to see him. He'll get away, and he'll figure it out from there. 4 o'clock in the morning, he takes his few belongings that he has, and he's going to make the grand escape. As he's leaving I don't know what you can call it, there was no real buildings back then, but the structure that the yeshiva was in, he hears a big bang and a boy crying. A heart he has. Yeah, he wants to run away, but somebody must have got hurt. Puts his little bag, a suitcase we'll call it, on the side, and goes running to see what happened. And he sees another boy that he knows from the yeshiva, who had woken up in the middle of the night and was going to go outside to the outhouse, and tripped and fell and hurt himself, and he was injured. And he sees that he's bleeding. So he runs to the boy and says, let me help you. Or let me call help, whatever, in the middle of the night, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. We'll call help. Before the days that these tzaddikim call that solo, that at all hours of the day and night drop everything and go running. But and the boy turns to him, and this is the punchline. The boy is laying on the floor, just fell, injured himself, losing blood. And he turns to his friend and he says, listen, call help, but I need a different favor first. Different favor first? What do you need first? We got to get your medical attention, that's first. He says, I promised my roommate that I would prepare for him the netilat yadayim for the morning near his bed tonight. And I know my roommate won't walk 4 amot without having netilat yadayim near his bed. And I forgot to prepare it for him. So if they're going to come help me now, and they're going to say I need to go to a doctor or to a hospital, then when my roommate wakes up in the morning, he won't be able to get out of bed, because he won't leave his bed without netilat yadayim. Please go put netilat yadayim by his bed, that he should have it, cover it, and then call medical help for me. The boy who later on became one of Gedolei Israel said, and that's why I said it's a shame I don't remember the name, but a very famous Gadol, said that was the moment he understood the difference, what's going wrong in his life. He understood that I was learning Torah, but I wasn't making the Torah part of me. Educationally, I was learning a lot of Torah. I was absorbing tons of knowledge. It was fascinating, it was interesting, but it didn't become my essence. He said, because there is no human power that allows somebody laying in pain, bleeding out, to think about his friend that needs netilat yadayim in an hour from now. That doesn't come in the human DNA. That comes from Torah Heichani, Lechetz ben Amram, go to Ben Amram. That's the only way possible to get to such a thing. One of the largest businesses out there today is personality enrichment. Or it's the biggest Ponzi scheme in this history of the world, probably. I don't want to get sued, so I can't say names clearly. I've been down that road, that's how I know about it. But let's just say talks and whatever, different types of things you understand on your own. Biggest Ponzi scheme ever. People get up there, they preach to you, so, you have to have energy, be in a better mood, this, that. At night they go do drugs because they themselves are the most depressed, and that's roughly the system. And they get paid a lot of money for it. Because everybody's desperate. And there are a decent strain of people in society that want to live a decent life. But it's not working. There's more motivational speeches on YouTube than there ever was available to anyone in mankind. And I don't see people being more motivated today. I see them being a lot less motivated. AKA, every large corporation in the United States has no workforce. Nobody wants to work anymore. If we were all so motivated, we would have a surplus of potential employees. Now we put out jobs, I know for my companies, for every 100 jobs, if we get 40 applications, which out of them, most of them are not even qualified, it's a miracle. Literally a miracle, and not low-paying jobs. They used to say it's because they're low-paying jobs. I'm talking about jobs that put you in the upper middle class America, making a lot of money. And with all that, but wait a second, what happened to all this motivation? What happened to all these TV channels that have speaker after speaker talking to you about how perfect life is and how you got to be hungry and you got to be this and you got to be that and you got to want? What about walk into a Barnes & Nobles, if they still exist, and see rows and rows of self-help books? Rows, literally rows. Or on a simple Kindle search of what you can buy. How many self-help books there? There's more help available than ever. Every third person today is some therapist or shrink in one version or the other. So there's more help in that way also. But I don't see it working. Nobody's getting better. You know why? Because they're not doing a bad thing. They're providing a service, knowledge. Knowledge is great, and it's important. It's critical. Everybody should have vast amounts of knowledge, even in things they don't think are important, because it's important to be worldly. But that's not you. That's something you know. There's only one type of knowledge that if a person is willing to accept, you have to actually be willing to accept it, can actually make you a better person, and you have a normal personality. That's that Torah that the Satan went screaming that he wants to know where it is. That's where Yosef HaTzadik's words hit home to the Shvatim. Ani Yosef. He looks at the Shvatim and he tells them, you're busy telling me that when your father is going to see Binyamin, that Binyamin didn't come back, he's not going to be able to tolerate the suffering, and he's going to die from it. And that you took collateral over the child. And all that you're saying. And I agree with you. But why didn't you think about all this before you sold me? Why only when it came to Binyamin was your father's health and sanity and important to you? You know, Yosef told him, because then you sat as a bezdin. You used your intellect and you said intellectually he's a roidef, this, that. But that's where it ended. Now you put your heart into it. Of course, we're talking about shiftei ka. I'm saying it in very terms that have nothing to do with what really happened there. It's just that we should learn from it something. That's what he told them. And what ended up with the Shvatim? Mipnei abusha. They couldn't stand it. They couldn't deal with it because they were so shamed. How could it be that we betrayed our commitment to family values over an internal fight, even if we were right? How could it be that we saw our brother beg us, bitchaneno eleinu, and he was begging us, and that alone didn't outweigh everything else? Where was the heart? And where did we go wrong? Mishnah Pirkei Avot, Perek Gimel, Mishnah Yud Zayin says, Im ein Torah, ein derech eretz, im ein derech eretz, ein Torah. If there's no Torah, a person will never have derech eretz. That's true. I'm saying not that the Mishnah needs my approval, meaning we see it every day in practical implication. But im ein derech eretz, ein Torah. It's hand in hand. It has to go both ways. If you see somebody who doesn't behave like a mensch, simply put, through and through, I don't care how much Torah he knows. It's just knowledge. There's nothing to it. Not only that, it's like the Kaveh Yashar said, it's a nevela masricha. It stinks, and the fact that you can't smell that it stinks is dangerous because you're going to be influenced by it. I don't remember which Gadol it was, but it was also one of the famous ones. Shalom brings it down in his book Lev Shalom a few times, twice I think in the book he brought it down, this story. And one of the Gedolei Yisrael was, maybe it was Rabbi Zalman, maybe, I might be wrong, but one Shabbat afternoon, a boy had some question and learning, whatever it was, and he walked all the way to his house and he knocked on the door. The Rebbitzin answered and said she wants to speak to the rabbi. And she said the rabbi is sleeping, he's taking a nap. Shabbat afternoon, the rabbi is also entitled to rest once in a while. And the boy innocently said, "Oh, I didn't know rabbis go to sleep on Shabbat. I thought they learn." And he meant it innocently. Whoever this gadol was heard it. He jumped out of bed, he spent time, spoke to the boy, and took upon himself he's never going to go to sleep again on Shabbat. That's when Torah is your essence. A normal person will say, what does this kid know? He's the rabbi of Klal Yisrael. He knows what a workload I have all week, what a stress I have to deal with. He has no idea. What does he know? Who is he to even think that way? More than that, today with the Gabaim in every rabbi's house, they would have thrown the kid down the steps. They would have said, chutzpah, no kavod. But a real Adam Gadol who made the Torah part of his essence said, wait a second, he's right. I can do without the sleep. Why am I going to sleep? That's when the Torah becomes who you are. Not that the Torah becomes another piece of knowledge that you happen to learn. You happen to have learned along the way. You happen to have known. And by the way, that's, you can continue with this. We're out of time, but you can continue with this theme in many, many ways. That's why Hashem had a Tainan Talmidei Rabbi Akiva and they lost their lives, and then the list goes on and on. Whenever there was a situation that, on whatever levels of that generation, Hashem felt that character traits weren't flawless, at that point, Hashem stopped it. He didn't let it continue. Definitely when we're talking about great people that we're supposed to give over the Torah to the next generation. And historically, we can go, there's no time today, but if you want some other day, gladly, we can go through it and show time after time when there were character flaws in people, when their personality wasn't developed thoroughly as a mensch, when the Torah was an external knowledge versus an internal understanding. Not that I'm saying that, God forbid, about Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, we don't begin to understand what their sin is. There's a sharp voice. There's a rabbi in Israel, became popular lately. He learned by me in the Kollel for many years. His name is Pinchas Erlanger. He wrote a bunch of Sfarim also. So he has a sharp chidush, you have to understand it, but on Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. He says that how could it be that they didn't respect each other? How could it? It doesn't make any sense, right? Talking about Gdolei Olam and that. So he answers it in a sharp way. He says that, what does it say over there in the Gemara? It was 24,000 students, but that's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara says there were 12,000 pairs. Why 12,000 pairs? Say straight, 24,000 people. It's not a math class. Why doesn't it say it straight? So he says like this. He says their Rebbe was Rav Akiva. Rav Akiva's memra, his legacy that he left over in the world, was V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. So that makes the question even bigger. How could it be that they didn't respect each other if their own Rebbe, his whole legacy was V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha? So most of the Mefarshim learn that his legacy of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha came as a result of the great tragedy of losing all his students. But that's not the Pashtut in the Gemara, by the way. Pashtut in the Gemara was always his legacy. So Pinchas Erlanger Shlita, he has a chap, it's unbelievable, I love this one. He said, he gufa. So what does it mean? He said, if you would see in the morning, without the other person realizing that you're watching, somebody woke up and got dressed and whatever, and they're about to leave the house, they look in the mirror on the way out, and you hear them talking to themselves. Say, wow, my hair looks good today, my jacket looks so beautiful, I'm so smart, I'm going to such a good school, the world is lucky to have me. You'd see him talking like that for 5 minutes. What would you think about such a person? One word, meshugana, right? For that, the psychiatric wards. Should be admitted. Literally, that's not an exaggeration. They got to a level of V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. They literally felt their friend inside their heart, as if it was part of them. So to them, to compliment a friend was like looking in the mirror and saying, you're so beautiful. On that Hashem had a ta'ana. He said, as much as you love him, you still have to understand he has needs. And everybody needs to hear a good word. It's unbelievable chiddush. I think that's the best pshat out of all of them. Who am I to judge? But out of all the pshatim I heard in this Gemara is a bomb. But to get to a deep understanding like that of what it means to be soulmates and what it means to really love another person, and even a deeper understanding to know how to pull back on that in order to be able to provide the other person their needs despite the deep connection, that can only come from something that's beyond human powers. In the DNA of the world, that doesn't exist. That comes from the Torah Kedosha. We should take the great lesson of the Shvatim that realized they almost lost it all. Olam hazen, olam haba. God forbid to never find ourselves in a situation where we say, wait, we tried so hard, but there's nothing. Imein de'acheretz ein Torah. All the Torah was nothing. And if we work on our true character traits that come from grounded ethical values, then B'ezrat Hashem, our knowledge that we have will actually be productive knowledge, and knowledge that Hashem's proud of, and we should all have a happy and healthy Shabbat and a month, and a warm winter, even if it's cold outside. It should be warm in the heart.